Welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. Our mission is to share what we have learned from our experience and the experience of others to help you make more money investing like a pro. We want to teach you how to create wealth by investing in real estate the Discount Property Investor way. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. Thanks for tuning in.
Closing deals.
Closing deals, guys. This is the fun part.
Take two. That's right.
Oh man! So we were playing around with the settings here, and we forgot to start recording.
But yeah, 10, 15 minutes later. That's
we're doing 4K.
I think we can do it better now because we kind of bounced around a little.
We got all the
last
junk out of our head.
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about where we're at if we're going to be thinking about closing a deal. We've gone through the steps of wholesaling, guys, and that's what we're talking about.
Briefly
here
touch on them. We marketed of our motivated sellers.
Step 1, we figured out what wholesaling is. Step 2, we're marketing to motivated sellers. We're trying to find some good deals. What's the next, Dave?
Analyzing.
We're going to figure out what that property's worth.
And we're going to reverse engineer an offer.
We're going to figure out the maximum amount we can offer. We're going to then negotiate with that seller. Then we're going to get it under contract, right?
By securing the deal. We're going to use a contract to gain control.
Send a bunch of offers. One of them finally gets accepted. We've negotiated a great price.
Next, we go to market the deal, and we use a checklist.
We've got a big marketing checklist we like to use. We go through a bunch of steps. We get that property sold, and then we meet someone, and they say, hey, Dave, I really want to buy this house from you.
Okay, role play.
Let's do it.
Mike, you're a seller.
I'm a seller.
We just put a property under contract last week over on Virginia for about $42,000.
Mm-hmm.
We decided we want to keep it. We were going to wholesale it, but it's going to make for a good project for us. So let's say that you had that property listed and marketed out for $59,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a good spread between 42, right? And I'm a buyer. I see the marketing on Facebook or Craigslist, or maybe I get an email because I'm on your buyer's list, Mike. And I say, hey, this looks good. I go out and I look at it, and then I call Mike up. Ring, ring. Mike says, hello, and I say, hey, Mike, I saw the property that you're marketing for $59,000. I even went and looked at it already. It looks really good. I would like to make you an offer to buy it, but I can't pay $59,000. Will you accept $55,000 if I can close quickly and I don't have a bunch of contingencies?
So then as a wholesaler, as a seller, I'm going to talk to Dave, and I want to interview him and find out if he's legit too. So I want to know, hey, Dave, okay, you said you can close quick. That's great. So are you a cash buyer, Dave? That's what I want to know next. Dave?
Yes, I am a cash buyer.
Oh, great.
It's not my cash, but I have partners that have cash or a line of credit.
Okay.
Cash buyer.
Awesome. So
Same thing, right?
You can close on this date, and I'm going to align that date with my AB contract, guys. So I got this property under contract, and it's scheduled to close on some date. So I'm going to say, hey, Dave, can you close on this day? And you're going to say,
absolutely, I can close on this day. Now,
oftentimes they're going to say something else. I'd love to close sooner.
Yeah, I love to close
cash
sooner.
Buyers always want the property tomorrow.
So a cash buyer doesn't necessarily mean that it's their cash, but they have the access to the cash. I think I really want to define that. So, the opposite of a cash buyer is somebody that has to go get a loan. So when we say cash buyer, they may still have a loan from a private lender, a hard money lender, or even a line of credit, right? But it's quick access, and that's really what we mean. It doesn't mean it's their cash, but they have quick access to cash to close on it.
That's a really good point. So if somebody says, I use this hard money lender.
Great.
Here.
Are you pre-approved? Cool. You're a cash buyer.
Yeah, exactly. Or do they have to get through the property first? Because sometimes the hard money lender wants to go see it. Say, okay, cool. Can you get them through without the contract?
Yep.
If they can't, say, okay, well, I'm still shopping the deal if it's right away. If you're wanting them to get the contract on it, write up the contract and say subject to this person walking through.
Okay, we digressed.
We did.
So you have it under you have a deal marketed at $59,000. You bought it at $42,000. I come in, I say I want it. I'll pay you $55,000. Can you do $55,000, Mike?
Yes, I can, Dave.
Okay, deal, done deal. So we verbally agreed to get this deal done.
Perfect.
Now, I'm a cash buyer. I want to close quick. Let's say that you have some inspection periods still, which you do, because I know this deal, and your close date is 30 days out, and we're 3 or 4 days in. So you got basically a month to close. So I say to you, hey, I need to do some inspections, but I don't need to do a ton. I need to do a sewer scope, and I need to get my guys out there. Can I have a couple days? Can I have 3 days?
So as a wholesaler, I don't want to do this, but as an investor, I know that sometimes you have to give someone a little bit of leeway. So I've got plenty of time left on my inspection period. So I say, Dave.
You had, I think, 20 days.
Right.
And
so
you're
I've got,
3 in. You had 17 left. I'm only asking for 3.
So I would say, Dave, yes, you can do that. I'm going to need you to let me know, though, after those 3 days right away. Or if anything comes up during those, just let me know right away because, as you know, I'm a wholesaler and I have to get this property sold.
If you don't buy it, I got to find somebody else. Now,
I'm committed to this seller,
yes,
and I need to get it sold. So I would say, yes, Dave, I can. I'm going to limit it. Let's jump back out of this, Dave, because we're going to start talking about the contracts. And I want to talk, before we do that, about our title companies and closing attorneys, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Before we get into the weeds of contracts.
Okay, just real quick, though.
Sure.
So we've agreed. I'm either going to send him a contract or he's going to send me one, and we're going to have it in writing.
Excellent.
That at that point in time, you should stop marketing it, or if you do continue to market it as it's under contract, but you're accepting backup offers, right? You can also use this to build your buyers list because people are going to be calling about it, and you can say, oh, it just sold already. I get a lot of deals, though, in this area. Do you want me to call you when I get the next one? Boom, you're building your buyers list. So we're going to pause from this situation, and we're going to talk about the types.
What Dave just said, though, you could say, it just sold, but he's got 3 days of inspections. If you want to check it out and he backs out,
go look at it.
Yeah.
Great
So this
point.
is a great way to build your buyers list,
Love
like
that.
Dave said. Getting back to first things first. So title companies and closing attorneys.
They are going to be required to do deals.
So, yes. Not required. We highly recommend you do it.
I would make it a requirement
I
for
would
all
say-
of my students and your students, of course. You don't need to use them, but it's going to be dangerous because you're not protected.
Right.
That's the purpose of these two parties, a title company or attorney, is to protect the interests of everybody, not just you.
Exactly. The seller, the original seller.
You
the wholesaler.
and the buyer.
The end buyer. Your end buyer.
And your end buyer's protection is protected because when he fixes it up or decides to sell it in a day or 10 years, he can do so at that point too.
And 95% of the time, your end buyer is going to want to use a title company. So
Absolutely.
we highly recommend using or a closing attorney.
So, not to dive too deep down the rabbit hole of
Let's
title
not.
companies and attorneys, depending on where you live, one or the other may be more prevalent. I can't speak to outside of the U.S. because I don't know, but Mike and I live in the state of Missouri, and title companies are the thing here. Attorneys can also close deals in the state of Missouri. I've done it with attorneys before.
And again, I don't know why. I'm pretty sure it's some law that just states that attorneys have to close all real estate transactions.
In some states.
Exactly.
Yes.
I don't know why. And there's even in Missouri, so there can be debates on, should I use a title company or an attorney? Well, it's just pretty common to use title companies, so that's what we do.
That's what we do. That's right.
Again, they specialize in it.
So we're going to group title companies and attorneys into one category for just a second. Why are they important? Well, we had mentioned that it's about protecting everyone involved's interest, right? But in order for a contract to be legal and valid and a property to be under contract, you have to do two things. You have to open escrow with an escrow company. Well, guess what? Title companies are escrow companies.
Mm-hmm.
Attorneys can also be escrow companies or own escrow companies, but you have to open escrow with an escrow company. That's number one, by delivering your contract. And number two, you have to deposit your consideration for your agreement, which is called earnest money. So earnest money goes into an escrow account who is owned by an escrow company, and they're going to facilitate the transaction. They're going to make sure that all the debts are paid whenever it's transferred. And they're also going to make sure that the deed is recorded with the county to show the transfer. So the ownership actually changes. So that's why the title companies come into play. They guarantee you that you can sell that property later if you buy it through a title company because you get what's called title insurance. Again, I don't want to dive down this hole too deep, but we highly recommend you use them because it protects not only your interest, but everybody else's interest involved. Okay?
Awesome.
So, moving on.
Okay, so we've talked about title companies. Now let's talk a little bit about the types of closes. And then, Dave, let's circle back to our contracts and maybe our discussion. So we can
Perfect.
kind of go into the weeds a little bit more with that.
Got it. Love that
So,
idea.
types of closes and why we use the different types of closes. Okay? I think we talked about A, B, B, C, but if not, let's refresh on that one.
Sure.
Okay, so we're just going to use these little symbols. So A would be your seller, B is you, the wholesaler, and C is your end buyer. So your AB transaction is between the seller
And you,
the wholesaler, and your BC is between you the wholesaler, and C, your end buyer. Okay? So A, B, B, C. All right? So just so we're all on the same page when we start going through some of this stuff. You can do a double closing, which is where you, as the wholesaler,
let me help. It's separated. That's
exactly
the easiest way to look at it. It's separated because there's two closings. You are still going to purchase from the seller, right? But simultaneously, or typically on the same day, you're going to then turn around and you're going to sell it to your buyer. You can't sell it to your buyer if you don't buy it first. The cool thing is you don't need your own money to do this in most areas. And if not, you can use a transactional funder to help with this. But we in the state of Missouri can do what's called double closes that are dry funded, meaning we can use our end buyer's money. But at the end of the day, you're still having an A to B closing, and then you're selling it B to C. It's two transactions. I just want to make that very apparent.
What's also important is you are on the chain of title. So the title company
for a second or a day or a week or whatever.
Your name is literally going to be recorded on the title of that property. So it's out there, or whatever the name on that contract was that you wrote down is going to be on the chain of title.
Correct.
So that's the A, B, B, C, or a double close. So we called it a dry funded double close, means no money of our own, the wholesaler, but the end buyer's money flows through, pays everybody out.
Either way, though, you have two transactions, you have two sets of costs, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's pros and cons. Let's talk about the pros and cons, and then we're going to move to the assignment, talk about those pros and cons. Or should we do the assignment
Let's talk
first?
about assignment and then pros and cons.
Okay, I like it. Let's do it. So number one is the double close.
The second option.
The second is the assignment. Go ahead.
So the assignment, you've got your AB contract. We already had that, right? But now, when Dave and I were talking, we say, hey, Dave, I'm only making, $1,000. I'm not making very much money. And again, not using our numbers from before, but I'm not making very much money. Can I just assign this to you? And then that way you just take over my responsibility in this contract. Dave says, sure. I just want to buy the property. So an assignment of the contract is another piece of paper, and you're going to state on there that Dave is taking over your interest in that AB contract. So what happens is you show Dave that contract, Dave signs the assignment, then you bring the AB contract and the assignment of the contract to the closing company or title company, closing attorney, and they then make the transaction happen. They facilitate the transaction between party A and party C.
Yep. Now you saw me texting over here. I apologize. I lost my train of thought. I just want to make sure that we touched on one thing, though. When you are assigning a contract, the person that is considered the assignee, meaning the end buyer, right? There's an assignor and assignee. The assignor is the person that actually has the property under contract, and he is assigning his interest to the end buyer via an assignment, so the assignee is who signs it. Now, again, I don't know if you touched on this, Mike, or not, but this is very important. In order to do an assignment, you have to show them your original contract, and they have to agree to all of those terms. Not some, all.
Correct. They're taking over your contract.
They are basically stepping into your shoes to fulfill all of the items in that contract. Now, the assignment agreement will also have a cost. In order for you to step into my shoes to buy this deal, you have to pay me $10,000. So let's say in our scenario, we buy it at 42, we sell it at 52. They're going to come to closing and they're going to bring 52,000. 42 of it's going to be directed to the seller, and 10,000 will be directed to the assignor/wholesaler. So I think the main point I want to make, though, is that they are stepping in the shoes of you and are then obligated to fulfill all of the obligations in the agreement.
Great. All right, let's discuss the differences, when to use
Love
them,
it.
stuff
Pros
like
and
that.
cons.
One of the things just top of my head, every time that we talk about assignments.
Dropped it.
Oops. Every time that we talk about assignments versus double closing is when people talk about the legality of wholesaling and is it legal, is it not legal to market a property, et cetera, et cetera. In my opinion, the way that I interpret things, if you are double closing, you are physically buying that property. So you can represent that you are physically buying that property to the seller. If you have every intention of assigning and you only assign contracts, I do not believe that you should legally say you're going to buy that property. That's just the way that I interpret things.
Yeah, you should just say, I'm going to find a partner.
I'm going to find a partner
that's going to buy it, and we are going to buy it, not I.
Exactly, because you
Great
have
point.
no intention. Again, that goes back to our intention thing. We had a conversation about this a few podcasts back. So again, that's just something I just like to get out there.
It's a really good point, Mike. Transparency is the name of the game. You know, earlier we were kind of talking about when the buyer doesn't show up. And I think we skipped over that on this one.
We did. Well,
we talk about that.
Yeah.
But you want to collect non-refundable earnest money on your B2C agreement, right? And the reason that we like that is because if they don't show up, we now have something that we can use to give to the seller to buy us more time, or we can make some profit for our time in the meantime. But it also secures their interest if they go open escrow and deposit that earnest money.
Cool. Let's get back to the types of closes and the discussion about that. And
pros
then
and cons.
we got to get into the weeds on that too, though, Dave.
Okay.
So pros and cons of a double close. Biggest pro, if I'm making 13, 15, 20.
Let's go big. Let's say you're making $35,000.
$35,000.
And let's say that if I knew that as the buyer, I wouldn't be okay paying him $35,000.
Let's use similar numbers. So say Dave is buying this property for $52,000. He agreed to $52,000, and I'm making $35,000 as a wholesale fee. So I've got it locked up for like $15,000 or something like that. I mean, if I'm sitting in Dave's shoes, I'd be like, I might be making a bad decision.
Right.
Like, why would I be paying $35,000 more?
Just go find that deal.
He found that property's $15,000. Maybe I should go next door and offer $25,000 for the one next door instead of paying $50,000
so
for this one.
So the pro is that it's not as transparent. You can hide your purchase price. Wouldn't that be the easiest way to describe that?
Yeah, you hide your purchase price and your fee. You're the money that you're earning.
Great point.
For the work that you did. You're hiding
that
your
is
fee.
the pro.
You're concealing it. It's not hidden forever.
Yeah, that's true. After a month or two, it's going to come out. But you're concealing it now to get the deal done. That's the pro of double closing.
Another pro, and this is kind of a long-term game here, is you are physically taking title to that property, and you are physically selling that property. So
why is that important?
Well, so that's what I'm going into.
Okay.
So from an accounting perspective, you are getting, you're issued, what are they called from the title company or closing attorney?
Settlement statement.
Settlement statements.
HUD.
Right. And at the end of the year, you're going to have to pay taxes on things that you
profited on.
That you profited on, exactly. So your financials are going to look pretty strong to a bank if you bought and sold $10 million worth of real estate in a single year. You bought, $8 million and sold $10 million, and you made $2 million in profits. That's huge.
Right.
Whereas if you just assign it, it's just a marketing fee. There's no real skin in the game there. Right, Dave?
No, you're absolutely right, man. I love it. That's exactly right. So the pros are you can conceal the profits, and it's going to help you with your financials later because you're going to show a lot of money going in and out of your business.
Correct.
So that would be the two pros that we like. Another pro that I think is often overlooked is depending on your buyer, you may have to take title before you can sell it to them. So there are scenarios sometimes with hedge funds, or if we are selling to a buyer who's using hard money, they may not be okay with the signing. They may require you take possession before you sell it to them. That doesn't always happen that way, but there are certain scenarios that this happens. You have to take possession in some cases. So the double close is your only option. And again, it gets it done.
Talk about cons of the double close.
Let's jump in. Cons of the double close.
And there's only one that really comes to mind for me.
Cost.
Yeah.
That's it.
You are paying the title company to prepare 2 sets of documents and basically do the work twice. They're researching.
Well, they're providing a title policy twice, too. That's the bulk of the expense. Closing a transaction's $300 to $800, no matter what, typically, right? It's the title insurance policy that can be $800, $3,800. It could be $5,000 if the house is worth $2 million. $5,000. So the majority of your cost is the insurance policy, and when you double close, you got to get two of them. You got to get one for the buyer on the A to B and one for the buyer on the B to C. So hopefully you're not paying all those fees, but that's the thing, Mike. Cost.
100%, and it adds up, guys.
It does.
Even on a smaller deal, say you're only making $2,000, $3,000. If you don't think about that, you could be out. You could not make any money on a deal. You could actually have to bring money. There's been one wholesale, I think I brought like $30 to it just because I really wanted to do the right thing. I don't know if I ever told you that. It was back in the day. Yeah, I think I don't know. It was 100 or something. Not very much money. But yeah, I just wanted to get the deal closed. They already done everything. I just said, screw it. It is what it is. I've tied this property up for so long and, don't need to go into it. But yeah, so it's the cost. Double closing costs more money. Bottom line. I don't know. Is there anything else?
No, that's it. It's that simple, guys. Don't overcomplicate it. So you got pros of concealing your amounts. What were the other things we talked about with the pros?
Is you get to add to your bottom line.
Add to your bottom line, so your financial statements are going to look a little bit better. You may have to do it in the event that the buyer requests it. So those are going to be the pros. The cons are costs. That's it. Assignment, moving on.
Assignment.
Pros of the assignment.
It's cheaper.
It's way cheaper.
There's
zero cost
to you as the wholesaler.
To you as the wholesaler, if you do it right. You know, you can obviously negotiate in that you are going to cover something, but typically an assignment just means, hey, you're going to step in my shoes to fulfill my agreement for an X amount of price that's going to be paid to me. That's it. It's that simple, right? So the pro would be cost. It's cheap, if not free. Now, the cons.
It's super full.
It's just basically the opposite of the first thing.
Is that your end buyer is going to know that profit. We already went through it. Like, Dave would not be comfortable. I mean, even us as seasoned investors, man, it's a really big pill to swallow if somebody's buying a house for
$10,000 and they're making 30, selling it to you for 40.
And you're planning on making 40 after you rehab
the whole project. Or maybe even 15 or 20. Right?
So again, it's a very tough pill to swallow. Not saying that guy may not do it, and if you have a great relationship with him, maybe they will. But man, that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. So I would.
So the pro is cost. It's cheaper if not free. The cons are you can't conceal anything. You have to give them your A to B, and have them agree to all of those terms and agree to the assignment fee. In order for an assignment to work, all of it.
Here's another con. They're stepping into your shoes, Dave. If they don't fulfill that part of the contract, the seller has you as the person.
Correct. And that's where the and we circled back from this earlier. We kind of spun off from it. We're circling back now. That's where some of the things in our B2C contract are going to vary from the A to B. Can we dive into this for a second?
I think this is the time. This is it.
Okay. Number one. Remove all of the CYAs that are open-ended and aren't defined.
I just want to restate it, just so we're clear. We are going back now to our example at the beginning. So Dave and I were talking about purchase or selling the property.
It's kind of hard not to jump around.
I know. So we're going back to when Dave and I are negotiating on price. Dave says, yes, I want to buy it. So now we're talking about our BC contracts. Yep. So we're talking about what do we do different.
I'm either going to send one to Mike. All right. We agreed. $55,000. Same scenario.
We're agreeing.
You have it for 42. You're marketing it for 55. I went and viewed it, and I say, hey, I like it, but I can only pay 55, or that's all I'm willing to pay. And you say, screw it. That's a great deal for me.
Let's do it.
I'm at 42. If my math is correct, it's a $13K spread. Okay?
Okay, so that's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
We love it. We're both happy. Dave's going to get a property he likes. I'm going to make a $12,000
win.
Yeah, exactly.
Win.
$12,000 fee.
Seller.
The seller's going to get to sell the property.
Win.
For the price that you guys agreed was fair. Everybody's winning, which is great. So the difference between our AB and our BC contract now is what we're kind of going to discuss.
Two ways this can work. I can send him a contract, or he can send me a contract.
Okay. And
ideally, you want to have control.
Right.
If somebody sends you a contract, it's what they write. If you send it, you can write it. So please take off.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Most of the time,
trying to not do that as much here.
Most of the time, you want to send the contract because then you're in control of the language in the contract, just like you were when you were selling or when you were buying the property.
So when you're in control, what do you need to do? A, Remove the CYAs that are open-ended. Remove the based on partner's approval. Remove the contingent upon buyer's opinion of taxes, title, value. These are open-ended CYAs that are going to bite you in the butt. So if they want an inspection period, fine. Offer them one. Keep it short. It is going to have a deadline, though, right? Make sure that all of those contingencies that they have are defined, whereas your contingencies with your seller may not be as defined.
Exactly.
But that's the purpose, is if they aren't defined as much, you have a lot of ways to get out. You're protected. But when you're selling it, you want to limit those ways out. It's just common sense. So removing the CYAs that are open-ended, define them if they do want some. And they typically are. Me as a buyer, Mike as a seller, I'm going to say I need at least 3 to 5 days. I need a sewer scope, and I need to do some inspections. But that's it. So if we can agree on 3 to 5 days and you have at least that on your end, we can get this deal done.
Okay, so I've got the AB and I've got plenty of time on it. And I say, Dave, okay, I get that you need to get a sewer scope and I get you want to have it under contract before you spend money to do that. How about 3 days? Can you do 3 days inspection? That way, I'm a wholesaler. I've got to find a buyer. If you're going to back out, I need to know that, right away so I can find another buyer and I don't burn time on my contract and my inspection period. Dave, what do you say?
I say, great.
Cool.
Do you want me to send you a contract, or do you have one that you want to send to me?
Dave,
ideally,
I will send you a contract in 15 minutes when I finish typing it up.
Right. Love it. So Mike's going to remove those CYAs.
And I'm going to put in there that Dave has 3 days to perform his inspection.
Define it. Love it.
That's it.
That's it.
And again, so then send it to Dave. Dave signs it.
Okay. Now we're going to add one more thing, Mike. We're going to add the CYA to cover our
This is extremely important.
B. You have your AB and your BC. Mm-hmm. So what is that and why and how do we add
Always cover your B, right?
Always
cover your B.
That's right.
So we put in our sales contract, this contract is contingent on the seller's, which is you in this situation, successful acquisition
of the property.
Why? Why do we do that? Well, because Dave...
In the event there's title work issues, or the seller doesn't show up to sign, or has a change of heart, and this happens, it's rare, but it happens, and they don't show up. Well, you've promised this property to a buyer. And if they don't buy it, you're out of contract. You've basically written and agreed to a contract that you can't legally even execute. Your control was removed by the seller not signing. So this contingency is nothing more than a legality thing to keep you from getting sued, right? And it basically says this contract, this whole deal is subject to me as the seller in this B2C scenario acquiring it successfully. If I can't acquire it to sell it to you, then it's void, right? You can't sue me for breach of contract because this whole thing is subject or contingent upon me buying it first. So it's one sentence. The simplest way to describe it would literally be verbatim, subject to seller's successful acquisition of the property, period.
And it is important, like Dave said, just avoid any issues because it happens, guys. We spend a lot of time finding a deal, marketing it, getting all the contracts lined up, and then something happens and you can't freaking close it.
Right. And this isn't a bad thing. I love adding this in there because I also want the buyer to know that I'm wholesaling it. And I want to be transparent. And I don't want them to not be transparent with me and not show up. I'd rather everybody be transparent. Hopefully we're friends and we can make a deal and everyone can be held accountable for those actions, right? So that's kind of where we come in with the B2C contract. So we talked about title companies and attorneys and why we use them and why they are there to facilitate and provide insurance, but also to have a licensed escrow account that we can deposit our earnest money into, as well as our contract, to get the property under contract. They also then facilitate. We talked about the 2 ways of facilitating. Double close, which has pros and cons. Assignment, which has pros and cons. And then we talked about the difference of those contracts. Mm-hmm. Your A to B is going to be more wide with lots of outs. Your B to C is going to be more narrowed and defined with very little outs, or they are going to be defined why there would be an out and when. You have 3 days to get out in a 3-day inspection period, but you got to opt out in those 3 days. If it gets to the 4th day, those are done. You're in. You're locked in. What do we miss? Non-refundable earnest money we need to touch on.
Sure.
And that's probably it. I mean, I can't really think of...
One other thing would be why we always get a BC contract
first. So 2 things. Let's touch on those. I love it. Let's start with the earnest money.
So earnest money, and this is one that's a little touchy in my opinion, because I don't like to do it, and we buy a lot of houses.
It depends on who you're working with.
Yes.
Too. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're talking about non-refundable earnest money, and you would put that sometimes in your BC contract.
Let's go big picture. Earnest money is going to be required on your A to B and your B to C.
Correct.
Even with an assignment, typically, there's going to be some sort of earnest money, right? Typically. Not always, but typically. In your A to B, guys, you want to make it as low as possible. This is your money you have to put up.
Mm-hmm.
We do it for $10 or $100, 80 to 90% of the time. Maybe on that 5 or 10% chance we have to go pay $500 or $1,000 to appease the seller, but typically it's $10. Okay? So we have to deposit that with our contract. We now have control of this property. Well, when we go to sell it, we're not going to make it as easy for the buyer to just be able to walk away and only have damages of losing their earnest money. Instead, we're going to say, put some skin in the game. We want to see $1,500, $2,000, maybe $5,000 non-refundable earnest money. That money goes towards the price of purchase at closing. But if they decide to back out between now and the closing, that money is gone. So it basically holds their feet to the fire. Shit or get off the pot. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we always require or ask for non-refundable. That amount can be whatever you decide. And Mike, you had mentioned earlier that, if it's a buyer that we've worked with 35 times already, we're not going to require that. We know they're going to close. But if you are new to this business, and this is the whole purpose of this podcast, for the people that are new, if you are new to this business and you don't know that buyer or you don't trust that buyer, simply ask or require for non-refundable earnest money. Get a receipt when they deposit that money and make it non-refundable either in your double close or your B2C contract or your assignment.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize, though, be reasonable. Don't ask for $10,000 non-refundable earnest money on a
$1,000 to $2,000 typically.
$30,000 property.
Love it.
Make sure you're getting deals done with that. So then the second thing that I mentioned was, why do we always do a BC contract before we do an assignment, Dave?
Love it.
So one, it's simple. We've got, in our systems, we've got built out. It's very, very easy for us to create, generate, and then send a BC contract. The second reason is something we've kind of already touched on, is that assignment fee can be kind of touchy.
Yep.
So say it's a borderline deal. We're only making $4,000 on it, but the total purchase price is only $15,000. So again, we bought the property for $11,000. We're selling it for $15,000, and the end buyer says, okay, great. Well, same thing in that end buyer's mind. That's $4,000 towards a property that they're only paying for $11,000. That's a lot of money I'm paying to somebody.
That's about a 45%. That's a rough estimate.
Yeah.
Markup.
Yeah.
Now, I personally wouldn't care about the $4,000
exactly.
because we know the business.
And
but some people may
don't.
not like that.
Yeah, they may not like it at all. So
And it may kill a deal.
Right. So you want to get that BC contract, get that money, that earnest money deposited, and then
get them to agree to the number. They don't need to know all of the numbers. They need to just see value in that number.
Exactly.
Love it.
So then they are locked in. They're committed to purchasing. Then a couple days maybe go by, and you say, hey, and you talk to your title company, obviously, and say, hey, I'm not making very much money because I'd have to do a double close. So this $4,000 profit, just wipe $1,000 off the table. It's going to go to the title company.
It's going to go to $3,000 if I have to do double close.
So now your skinny deal gets even skinnier, and you're only making $3,000, which again, it's a great payday. Don't get me wrong. But to try to save some of that money, you could assign it. So you would say, hey, Dave, Mr. Buyer, would you mind if I assign this contract to you? That way, I don't have to pay the closing costs, and it just saves me a little bit of money, and you still get the property. They said, sure, no problem.
Yeah, hey, no problem. What are you? I'm curious anyway. What are you into it for? You into it for 11? Oh man, that's great. You're gonna make $4,000. I don't care. I am still happy at 15. I see value there.
Right.
But that saves Mike double closing costs, and it allows me a lot of transparency as the buyer to see what's going on. I already, in order to assign, I'm gonna have to know that assignment number. But now I'm gonna actually get to view Mike's contract to see, hey, what else did you promise? What else was included or excluded from the sale that I may not be aware of? It's going to give me insight to the deal.
Right. So it's a little bit of extra paperwork, But again, we find value in it. I find value in it. I just think it's the right way to do assignments as well, because otherwise you have to present the original AB contract at the time you present an assignment contract.
You do. It has to be done together. It can't.
You can't just say, "Here's an assignment."
Well, think of it this way: if you did it that way, and you didn't have them both, and you said, "Hey, I want to assign my interest in this property to you, but I don't know when it's going to close, or what inspections you still have left,
or what you promised,
or
to
what
them.
you promised
Right,
to them,
you
and I'm
could've
just going to sign and say, okay, I'll do it." No, I need to know all of the details. So
Exactly. The AB contract could say that the seller is removing the HVAC system. Like, you don't know that.
You got to know that.
Again,
stuff.
so if I'm taking over that contract, I want to know what's in it.
Love it.
So that's why we use that. I think that's pretty much everything we have on closing deals for today. Dave, you had anything else you wanted to add?
No, guys. I mean, it's very, very simple.
This is the fun part.
This is the part I think that we almost didn't even talk about this, but this is where you get paid.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
I mean, this is where all of the progress and work that you have done up to this point is actually realized. You actually get a check from a title company or a closing attorney, on the day of closing or maybe the day after, depending on if funding is delayed, but you get to reap the benefits of your efforts. So getting paid is really what it comes down to. Selling deals, we've been talking about it for 35 minutes at this point. The easiest way to sum it up in, let's say 30 seconds-ish is there's two ways to go about doing it: title companies or attorneys. There's two different types of contracts. You can double close, which is 2 transactions, or you can assign your interest in your agreement to another party, which will end up being 1 transaction that you just get paid for. And that's it. You get paid. And that's closing a deal. It's really not that hard. Build a relationship with your local title company or closing attorney, because they are going to be your best friend. They are going to help you get these deals done. Don't think that you need to know about title or about liens or about payoffs. Title companies and closing attorneys, they do it all for you. And they are basically like our best friends in business, Mike. Like, our company is best friends with a title company we want to be, right? Like, they are our closest person to helping us solve these problems, which is basically what we do. We solve problems and we get paid. And that, my friends, is what selling a deal is all about and what it consists of.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, please visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. We would also appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you in advance for your support, and remember, you make your money when you buy, and you get paid when you sell. Now let's go build some wealth.